I'm Becky Binder with Senior Director of Content Development for Cornet Global, and I welcome you to the webinar. Congratulations and thank you for speaking at the summit. It's to be chosen to speak and a privilege to address your peers and colleagues. Your responsibility for being the best you can. This webinar has been designed for you as an experienced summit speaker to further develop your presentation skills. To make Cornet Global Summits the most valuable and engaging professional development investment of the year for all our attendees to help them advance the profession and our value to their organizations. We know that effective education is key to this vision, and the most critical component to effective education is you, the people who will lead the educational sessions at the Global Summit this year in Berlin. So this has been set up to help you advance your speaking and facilitation skills. With today, to the webinar is Dan Sundt, the President and Chief Experience Officer of CEO Marketing and Design Specialist that is working with Cornet Global on the summit. He understands adult learning well and has designed a great webinar that will keep you engaged and provide you with at least one new concept or tool to your sessions. Take it in.
Well, good day, everybody. Thank you very much for being with us today. We know it's the end of the day in Europe, and we're all very busy. So we'll do our best to keep this light and moving along. And please go ahead and feel free to use the chat window or raise your hand if you have any questions or anything that you'd like to compute at any point along, because after all, we are preaching active learning and participation, and so we want to practice what we preach as well. We will cover a fair amount of information today and around engagement. You see on screen now a learning pyramid, which really lets us know what are the most effective methods of learning when it comes to retention. Because if somebody goes to a conference and they go to a learning session, we're hoping and they're hoping they'll remember something along the way. And what we know, we're going to get into some of the evidence behind it, is that active or participatory teaching methods are more effective. Passive teaching methods, which we have become too accustomed. So with that, we're going to turn it over to Pieter van der Laan here in a second. And Pieter has been kind enough to volunteer to talk about something that he did last year's summit. It was highly participatory, and it worked out well for him. And we feel it's better to have Pieter tell you that story than to have us tell you about concepts and whatnot. So, Pieter, I'm going to change to presenter you, and hopefully you your phone and feel free to tell your story for as long as you'd like. Take it away, Pieter. Still need it. There we go. There he is.
Thank you for giving me some time. Hi, my name is Pieter van der Laan. I'm a workplace strategist at UNO. UNO is based on new ways of working consultancy firm. We had the, let's say, the privilege to do a session last year at the event in Amsterdam. Let's say one of the things I always really appreciate doing is make it as interactive as possible. Last year we also had a let's say a topic that enables to make your talk or your presentation interactive, and the topic was about gamification. I'll go into any detail on what it exactly is, but let's say how to use game mechanics in real estate or facility management projects or programs. So it was quite interesting to tell them something about what game mechanics is, and what to do is also have the audience talk about notifications amongst themselves. And what we used is, let's say, a method which is called a World Cafe kind of setting, which I will explain a bit later what that means. Basically, what we did is we really thought on. I did this with a colleague, so we really thought on how we want to keep it as interactive as possible. So, let's say time we divided that into let's say a 50-minute presentation, 30-minute discussion, and a 50-minute wrap-up, which basically meant is that people had to present to each other what they discussed at their table. The interesting part was it's gamification, so there's always a fun factor involved. And what we did is the table with the best presentation, and I wanted it through applause of the other groups. We got the winner, and the prize they could get was a ticket on VIP boat to the event dinner later that evening. So making it likely with a fun factor, but also keeping it in depth with the topic. So a good, thorough presentation, enabling to have them a discussion amongst themselves on the basis of a number of statements. And present also what they came up with in their discussions. Made it a very lively event. I just want to go through the three topics and give some feedback on what's always important on the three aspects. So first of all, the presentation. What I try to do and consider if I present myself is that if you have a presentation, is that you start off with a clear intro and say what you want to present, or for instance, if you want to present a number of messages or conclusions, is that you present your conclusions, but just explain why you think these are the thoughts or conclusions you come up with. An anecdote. People love to hear a personal story. Why are you explaining this? Why do you want to present at a Cornet event and you want to present this topic? Of course, it's the content, but most of the time there's also a story behind, because you're passionate for what you're doing and you want to present it and make that clear to the people as well. And by presenting a personal anecdote, especially in the beginning, people are focused and are eager to get the context explaining this, and why do you think this is so important for them to note. And the thing which is very important, and I constantly see that also when I'm at seminars, at other presentations, if you use slides, stick to slides. So I would like to urge everybody, because this is, let's say, the more experienced group of speakers. We're all busy, but prepare slides in such a way that you already finished, let's say, a month before the presentation is exactly going to happen. There's nothing more frustrated, and you see that also in the audience, if the do not compare with the presentation or the talk you're giving. And then what we did also in, let's say, 50 minutes. 50 minutes is, of course, it's easier to prepare than 60 minutes. But always be prepared on what you're presenting and the slides you're giving. The discussion that was for us, it was a proactive, organized platform. Still, what I have to do is be the director of the interaction. You are the director of the interaction. So don't. What I hear a lot is to say, well, if there are any questions, please do free to interrupt. Most of them you don't get interrupted, and if you get interrupted, they're most of the same people. So if you want to engage people and also give the opportunity to new people to the Cornet event, the opportunity to engage, organize or direct the interaction yourself. We do World Cafe setting. Of course, there are also different settings, but just briefly, what a World Cafe is for the ones who don't know. This is on the basis of a number of statements. We had a number of tables in the setting, and people had to discuss these statements amongst their group on the table for a number of minutes. And so we had around three statements in total, so around 10 minutes per statement, and they had to write down what their thoughts were, and one of them had to present that. Very lively during the session, and especially at the end when you have the wrap up. That's the last part. With the wrap up is that it's good to get the opportunity to present to themselves and to the other groups they have been discussing, and having time for that, or having also time to have that discussion going on, is just that people hear the other views of colleagues in the session. It enabled them. That was also one of the feedback we got. It enabled them to, let's say, start getting to know some new people in the audience, because they felt affiliated with thoughts or the opinion they heard during that presentation. Basically, to wrap up my story now is that I always do appreciate interaction. If you want to make it more interactive, make it organize or direct the interaction yourself. So come up with a proactive way in order to pull people to the discussion. If you
Pieter?
Yeah.
So you didn't invite comments, but I do it myself. So can you give an example for that proactiveness in the interaction? I like the idea. I would appreciate an example.
So what I normally do is that during my presentation, for instance, I present also in a questionable situation. So I engage the audience with explaining the dilemmas I had in a certain situation. That opens the minds of people. Is that they say, "Hey, I do understand the let's say the dilemma you just discussed, and these thoughts on it." That's one. But what also helps is that throughout your presentation, then once in a while you come up with, for instance, a statement. I would like to hear your thoughts, audience, on this question or the statements, rather than asking them how is everybody doing, or are there any questions. So you organize the audience on a certain topic or question you have, and you want to throw into the audience. Is that a practical?
Yeah, no, okay, that helps. Yeah.
Yeah. Because add on that is that be aware that in come to the CoreNet events, but my experience, and we're talking about the CoreNet events, they have different experiences. There are really well experienced people in the audience. They have been there many times, or a long time in the field of business we're doing. But there are also let's say newcomers, and people that if you also address a bit on the differences in the group, and also give them the opportunity to for the newcomers to state their questions.
Sounds good.
Another thing is of course I talk quite some gamification. What I also sometimes do is I just bring some prizes with me. Say, well, for the questions or for the first 3 questions that have been stated, I've got a small token appreciation. People also like that. But once again, that's my personal my person, and also the topic I've been talking to. And that's a bit.
Thank you very much. That was really helpful, and we appreciate the time it took to hear that.
All right.
I'm having a hard time reclaiming the presenter role. I think you're going to have to do that for me. It's asking me for a host code. So if there's any way you can do that, that would be great. And there, thank you very much. So, Pieter covered a lot of great points. And, when we talk about participatory, he made a really key point around making sure that you're structuring the interactions, that it's not just a free-for-all. So that takes some design thinking in terms of how to move through your content. The things that is also important to remember, and Pieter is clearly in a facilitation role when it goes into a World Cafe format. And, we know that if we want to drive engagement, that facilitation is really the way to do it, to drive that participatory level of engagement. We know that we can become better presenters, and by becoming better presenters, we can be more engaging. We can engage the audience more deeply, without necessarily get them into an active learning role where they're working with each other, although that is certainly where we want everybody to go eventually. So we'll share some information today about both facilitation as well as presenting, because I'm not sure where everybody is on the continuum. And for those of you who are able to mute your own microphones and you're not needing to speak right away, do, and then unmute if you'd like to talk to us. Cornet Global has taken a lot of effort and constructed the speaker resource page that I referred to earlier. And at the speaker resource page, you'll see that it has 3 different sections, kind of a getting started for beginners and making progress and gaining mastery. Curated different pieces of content to help people who want to get better at presenting or facilitating, and it's a great way to go. You'll see towards the bottom of the page there is adult learning tips and techniques. That's a great PDF that is really a good starter if you want to use that speaker resource page. And you can send the link to this page, and please come back to it often, because you'll see this content evolve and change over time as we put in new pieces of content and bring it to life in a more meaningful way. And we're going to right now run a poll. Here's the question for the poll, and I'm going to bring it up in just a second. But it is, have you ever used CNG speaker resources page? And you may not remember, but we'd just be interested to know. Open up this poll now, and we'd just like to know from those of you who are watching and listening to the webinar, have you used this? And right now we see the votes coming in, and it looks like we've got 2 who have used it, 1 who says no, and another who doesn't remember, and then finally won't answer the poll. So thank you very much for answering that. We will run a new poll in just a couple of minutes. This one out and move on. This continuing expertise and engagement is really how we're thinking about bringing G presenters through an expertise continuum, if you will. We know that by confidence in your presentation skills can go a long way. If you don't have confidence in your presentation skills, it's difficult to move on to facilitation. But once achieving confidence in your presentation skills, then we know we can move into the facilitation realm. We're actively involving participants in kind of a peer-to-peer environment. When you become a facilitation master, you're able to integrate many different types of formats, many different types of questions, and kind of do it on the fly. And that's really where you become master. So the resources on the speaker resource page are kind of designed to help pull you through that continuum. Do another poll of those of you who are on the let me open the poll. Here we go. Phone right now. Like to you in terms of where you would consider yourself on the continuum. Do you think you're a not speaker, a pretty speaker, a good speaker, a pretty good facilitator, or a master facilitator? Some coming in now. to give you a little bit of preview before we close it up. Most of you are saying facilitator. So that poll and share those results. So that's good, and that's kind of where I put myself as well. I think, you know, saying you're a master facilitator is a pretty bold statement. It takes a while to get there and a lot of practice. But when you get into the upper end of that, you know that you become more valuable as a conference speaker, and you probably become more valuable in your own workplace because you can start to integrate some of these concepts into normal meetings and make those meetings more lively and engaging and experience with many meetings. So, in our professional lives, where we're blessed with somebody else change our perspective on things. I'm going to tell you about one of those times a few years ago. I've been designing participatory conferences for a long time. And 2 years ago, as brain science was really coming to life, and as most of you know, the last 10 years, we've learned so much more about the brain than we've ever known. It's incredible, and there are lots of experts out there in brain science. And if you were on the webinar last year, you heard a lot of them referenced. But the one who I like to pay attention to, his name is John Medina, and he wrote the book Brain Rules. It's 12 different principles that you can use to understand and then use that information in your everyday life. The reason I love Medina is that he is not only brilliant when it comes to the brain science itself, but he does it in such a way that's easy to understand, and it's actually quite entertaining when it comes down to it. He can help bring things to life in a way that most of the scientists don't do very well. So I'm going to share with you a video that he does, because, by the way, if you go to brainrules.net, that's brainrules.net. It's a website. It's Medina's website, and he's got a bunch of videos on it. In fact, they're also on iTunes, and you can download them for free from iTunes University. If you find this content as engaging as I do, you might find yourself using it as well. Open a new tab at the top of the page, Brain Rule number 9. I'm playing back off of my iTunes University. I'm going to, after this, I'm going to mute the microphone. I recommend the rest of you do as well, because this audio will come through your speakers and all your different audio streams. So just mute everybody. Let's make that easy. And this video now. Because heard from more than one person that they cannot hear the audio. Eckhard, we might play another video later. You were one of the people who initially could not hear it. Can you tell us how you fixed that? Apologies. We did test this and it did work, and for some reason the didn't play for every. So my apologies for that. The point of that particular video, I'm going to go ahead and post a little paragraph here on the chat window, is that when multiple senses are stimulated simultaneously, the brain begins to experience an information-rich learning experience and laps it up like ice cream. The more information per unit of time, and it remembers that information better too. And so essentially what Dina is saying here is that the more senses that we can make active during any learning opportunity, off that learner will be in terms of retaining that information. More equals more retention. And if you go to brainrules.net, there's a bunch of great videos on there that you can watch. From Medina and other great scientists, Global has developed 8 principles of global. I'm going to use quickly one at a time. Acting is what we've been talking about most, and it's the one principle I would encourage all of you to adopt as quickly as you can, and that is to put the power into the people's hands, to have them talk to each other, to learn from each other. You know, Pieter earlier talked about, give them information and let them process that information, and then they kind of do that. So don't do 45 minutes and then a Q&A. Do 3 or 4 or 5 minutes of content and design some kind of an interaction. We're using that information, applying it, and that's going to increase their memory tenfold. Problem to solve. Often we'll see case studies as a way to do this, where we're making up, they're based on real life or fiction, sign of a problem that needs to be solved. And when you give people a problem to solve, they are much more engaged than you tell them how to solve it. The principle of previous experience is really kind of twofold. Everybody comes to your learning session with a different level of experience, as Pieter mentioned, based on a different, their knowledge of this topic or even just their tenure in the industry. You need to kind of quickly figure out whether that previous experience is luggage, meaning it's positive and they bring something to the table, or a baggage, and because of previous experience, they're having a hard time grasping perhaps a new concept or a different way of doing things. So you, as the facilitator, to quickly understand that previous experience and play to it and use it in a constructive way. And for you, this really is a factor of your description and making sure that it stays on target, because we know that everybody's doing relevant content. We just need to make sure that we're delivering on the promise. Emotion action. This is another great piece. When we can connect with somebody on an emotional level, we are going to open them up much more quickly and get them engaged. When our emotions are aroused, we remember more. And that doesn't mean you should just gratuitously throw up picture babies and puppies, as I have. But Pieter talked about it earlier, and we'll get to it again later in the session. It's creating that emotional connection. Often it's with an anecdote or story, and you hook them with that right up front. Because when people hear stories about other people or themselves, they're much more likely to pay attention. So stories are core to creating those emotional connections. Full of self-learning says that everybody is a self-learner, and that, again, they come to these sessions with a certain amount of knowledge and belief in how they learn. So it's kind of up to you, again, to figure out how is a particular learner learning. We talk about multimodal learning a lot, where we talk about auditory, kinesthetic learners, and so we will try and satisfy all those learning styles in a single session. This gets a little bit more advanced, but it's an important principle to remember. The principle of alignment, and this is really that people are coming, that your content and your learning outcome and your activities are all going to be aligned together. And if they're not aligned around, a theme or very kind of strict guidelines, they go a little bit disconnected. And principle of fun. Should be fun. And usually having fun as you're presenting, and they should be having fun as they're learning and speaking with each other. And by all means, integrate fun into your learning principles. An active learning, process-centric, previous experience, relevance, emotional connection, self-learning, alignment, and fun. And you're going to find these 8 principles of adult learning in the Learning Techniques PDF that is on the Speak Resource page. So if you review it one more time before we close out today. I'm going to take just a brief pause here and see if there are any questions. Feel free to use the chat window if you'd like to, or raise your hand, or just kind of play in. Be along, but I do want to just give everybody an opportunity to catch up and ask any questions they've got. Okay, chat window. Having my eye on the participant window as well to make sure that everybody is with us, and please let your need be known. We have another guest who's going to speak to us about her experience last year, give you a different perspective on how she conducted a session at last year's Global Summit. Oscar, I am passing the privileges to you as the presenter, and please go ahead and take it away.
Can you hear me? Yeah. Thank you for being here. I'm Anneke Mezger from Royal Haskoning DHV, and I was participating in the Amsterdam Summit last year. What we did was we organized an interactive session with all the participants in the room, and what we did was follow your feet, as say, and we used statements with a short introduction for all topics, and then after every introduction we gave some statements, and we used the colors of the room, which very bright pieces from IKEA. Very simple, it didn't cost much, but just to give a sense of place. And with the statements, we asked everyone to go to the color that represented their statement. And so we saw that all the participants who were seated all day, or a couple of days, were really getting energy through the meeting. And it helped to get everyone involved. So with the microphones, we asked people to react on the statements, and that everyone is connected with the topics. What we found was a lot of energy, but everyone was also very positive at the end. So you see it in awareness, but also in how people hear the session. And there was one learning point. From my point of view, was that one from Asia was a little bit more shy, and she didn't want to stand up. And I really asked her to participate as well and walk with us. But, yeah, she didn't want to, and for me it was a lesson that although did not participate in the real movements, she was still engaged and favor opinion. So the atmosphere in the room was still in such a way that she felt relaxed and able to participate. So me, I think you don't have to push everyone, and things sometimes go a little bit different than you expect, but still, it's worth of it. Yeah, worth it. So that was one thing, and the other thing that I've learned, and I learned it from a previous session, and I think then you're doing it as well with this session, using the pictures. That by using the pictures in the international context, everyone understands what you mean, and troll or the understanding. So me, those are two key points that while being active and creating an atmosphere and having a positive vibe, you will have some key points that you can turn on to the session. So I wanted to share today with you, and I want to wish you all good luck with the session in Berlin.
Thank you, Annika. Are there any questions for Annika? And if you wouldn't mind, thank you very much. Got it. Any questions for Annika? She brought up a couple of great points, and we're going to get to the pictures in a second. But this idea of kind of colors again, to talk about the levels of senses that you're engaging, help you group people based on their or their commonalities, and get up and move. I tell you how important that can be is to have people get up and move around the room. It's hard for them to not pay attention if they're actually in motion, and so we like to do a lot of that. And then finally, recognizing putting preference of the one individual who did not want to stand up, but engaging her in learning, engaging her in the conversation, which I'm guessing she appreciated a whole lot. So thank you very much, Annika, for that. I appreciate it.
Yep.
So continuing expertise and engagement, and we're really talking a lot, both with Sundt and with Pieter about the facilitation piece of it. But there are some really great things you can do just as a presenter to gain confidence and to drive engagement with your folks. And when we think about gaining that confidence in your presentation, there are what I call high five. And the first one that you can adopt is the rule of three, and really is recognizing that probably your learners are probably not going to be able to learn a lot more than three key concepts. And so build your entire presentation around the three things that you think they must remember. And of course, it should be tied to your learning objectives for the session. The second, less is more. And you see, especially around graphic support, and this is what Annika was mentioning, it's really trying to use less and pictures more and eliminate busy slides. We're going to get into these in just a second as well in a little bit more detail. The third is the 10-minute rule, which really is every 10 minutes you need to change things up to maintain their attention. The record reverse, which will along with your own skills. The fifth one is to mix in story and emotion, which you heard Pieter talk about earlier when he talked about opening with an anecdote. So view these five in a little bit more detail. That's the rule of three. And because the video didn't work last time, I'm not going to go to it, but I will let you know that if you want to go for rules number 5 and number 6 on memory and reading to remember. And this is what Medina tells us in this video, that if you say something once, and even if you have a graphic on the screen that reinforces it, that's good enough. That you must repeat multiple times usually, so that people actually remember what you're talking about. So if you give yourself time to repeat, you probably only remember you can also probably fit in those three things. So we really want to kind of drive that home in terms of it take people a long time and a lot of repetition to integrate into their memories the content that you're learning. The lessons are always more. So is building your presentation around three things. For this one, just an example, we wanted you folks to understand why Cornet Global is moving towards active learning, to create self-awareness and critique of your own skills so that you're thinking about what you do as we're going through this. And we built a polling question around that. And encourage the commitment of at least one new concept or idea your sessions here in 2014. So that's how we use the rule for this presentation. Left about this, especially around the tech design or the visuals that you're using. A good primer on this one, go to BrainWorld's video for rule number 10, which is that vision trumps all other senses. Medina tells us there is why I don't use text on slides, because it takes the brain much longer to code text and encode it back in the brain, whereas there's are a shortcut memory. And so, as much as possible, we want to make sure that we are designing our slides to be clean and very communicative around one key principle. So talk about less is more. You go through presentations where the speaker is using the slides as keywords, and they literally have printed their script on the screen. And if you do that, your experience presenters, it's a no-no. There's nothing worse and more disengaging than somebody read their slides. Limits of text, none less than 32 points is the rule of thumb. Professionals say 24 points would be the minimum. I prefer to use 32 points as a minimum whenever possible. Communicate. The images are a shortcut to key concepts that we want you to remember. And Annika recognized that. It's a great way to quickly communicate a concept. And it's a bit of extra work on your side, but it's so much more effective for the learner to see a picture than to have to decode text. Establish big picture context before showing graphs and data. Again, we talked about stories earlier. We're going to talk about them again, actually, in a couple of minutes. But people need to kind of understand why you're going to delve into some content. You delve into that content. So make sure you set up that big picture context, especially if you're going to get into heavier content where it involves data, charts, graphs, etc. I think especially charts. I've had clients who tell me, I want that chart to be, I want people to be confused by that chart. I don't understand that perspective. So anytime you're going to use a chart or you need to reference data that's relatively busy, make sure that you bring out the key point that you want them to remember about the chart, and to do it visually. It does need reinforcing with one or two words we want them to remember. Say as much as possible. So I'm going to come up one more time. Limit the use of text, thing less than 32 points. You make it pictorially and make sure you get this in the big picture context for the data, everything that you can. 10 minutes, this one is very interesting. I'm going to show you a chart now that does come from Dr. Medina. And what they've learned is that the 10 wanes 10 minutes. And as you can see from this chart, it wanes significantly. So 10 minutes, if you capture the attention of your audience up front, you almost guarantee that 10 minutes later, you will do something that recaptures their attention. So at 10 minutes, you should be changing pace with something. Well, what kinds of things can you do? And Peter, thank you for the question. I'm going to get back to that one. I'm sorry, from Eckert. Back to your question before the end of the call here. So more than every 10 minutes, we have the following things. Stance interaction. This is probably the best thing. You give them some content. Now it's time for them to do a little bit of work around that content. The big picture content. I was thinking about that earlier. Question. One way to deal with people who are introverts and maybe might not want to participate as heavily with other people is you can ask an individual question. You can say, I want you to think to yourself about blah, 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 blah. And how would you handle that? And you give them, 30 seconds or 60 seconds to that question to themselves. And then with somebody else. And so then it's just two people talking, less for somebody who might be an introvert. And then you can get them into a larger discussion. So you're helping them get comfortable with time with other people. Play some music. Again, do anything that helps them to engage their senses. Anytime during a learning session, I also bring around like this is what Sarah calls them fidgets. They're little toys, skulls, throw balls, little puzzles. I throw those around on the tables so that people can do something with their hands, and we find they're actually doing something, even if it's not related to the learning. This are more engaged in their learning. Stand on a chair, sing, do anything for 10 minutes to change things up. If you go past that 10-minute mark, you're going to be in trouble from a learning perspective. Audio record rehearsal. Dwell on too much, but the function here is that you are rehearsing a long way and making sure that you smooth out the rough edges and that you are able to kind of work through the things that you don't see until you get there. So do rehearse, and if you can have somebody video record your rehearsals, you will be so much better off. It's so powerful to watch yourself presenting. It's uncomfortable, but very powerful, and it'll help you to refine your session and make it wonderful. Mixing stories and emotion. Again, when our emotions are peaked, we remember more. When we hear a story, we pay attention, much more so than watching slides go. When we actually have stories that are in context, anecdotes, relative to the situation or the learning, we know that that's much more powerful. Marketers have been playing with this for a while. I'm just going to read this book now. I'm not going to read it particularly, but what they're finding is that when memory or when emotions are engaged, memory is so much more heightened because it activates many more brain centers or sensitive parts of the brain when you get emotional content and stories out there. The other thing that I'm finding is that something called neural coupling. We tell a story, the tellers and the listener's brains are behaving very similar manners, and so they're kind of coupled together and get on the same page, if you will. Eckert asked a good question via that. Are there ants? Where to find good pictures? And best site that, first of all, you can always Google Creative Commons. Commons are free pictures as long as you attribute those pictures to the, they all come with different rights, but you just go Creative Commons and come up with a bunch of sites. One site that we find most useful is called CompFight. I'm just going to go ahead and put that in it's CompFight. And a whole bunch of free pictures. You just have to read and ensure that you're following the copyright rules. But these people who are willing to allow you to use their images for personal purposes as you give them credit, you don't have to pay for them. We'll also find opportunities. You might go to Shutterstock or any of the stock image sites, and you can get those images for these kinds of applications for $1 or less. And often I just spend that money because I just find it makes me more effective as a speaker. I'm using really great images. So I answered your question on where to find them. Creative Commons, Comfight.com, or any number of sites. You're welcome. The motion. Here are the 5 high points again. The rule of 3. Build your presentations around 3 key takeaways. Or, especially when we're talking about graphics, the rule, change it up every 10 minutes. And video record those rehearsals if you can. And make sure that you're mixing in stories and emotion wherever you can. 4 minutes left. Are there any questions? Feel free to use the chat window or chin if you'd like to. All right. I want to review one more time again to each remember. Active learning is the one we're all focusing on. Getting people to interact with each other as part of the learning experience. One of the pieces of coding that I use is the more they're talking, the better off you are. Problem-centric, help them solve problems. Recognize people's previous experience, what they bring to the table when they're coming to your sessions. Make sure that keeping it relevant takes and certainly to the prompt you've made in terms of what the session should be about. Emotional connections whenever you can. Recognize people's self-learning opportunities and how they like to learn, and then try to adapt to that as well. Make sure everything is aligned from the beginning to the end, and that it all feels like it hangs together and have fun. There's the here's a good question. What about mini tests? Thank you. Great question. I think mini tests are a great way to go through a session. And you could even start with a test if you wanted to, and then end with a test. Very simple test, but something that just helps you gauge where people are at the beginning and where they are at the end. Helps you feel better about learning, or it lets you know maybe where you may have missed the mark. So mini tests are a good way to mix things up, and that would certainly also fit in with the 10-minute rule. If people know they're going to be tested, they perform. So yeah, no doubt that mini tests are a great way to mix things up and draw interaction. Thank you, Eckhart. And type in a follow-up if you'd like to on that. This has been very good. I would like to open up one last piece of polling for you guys. I'm just going to right now. We'd like to know how you felt about today's session. And basically, not putting it on the screen right now, but you'll see it in your polling window. I found today's webinar great. Expectations, very useful, somewhat useful, or a waste of my time. Please be as honest as you can with us. We want to make sure that we're improving these sessions as they go along and making them valuable to everybody. So I'm going to leave that poll open for a little while. Pretty much everybody is answering B of those who have responded. Thank you very much. You have to provide specific feedback. Feel free to email Becky and Alina, and they'll feedback back to me anonymously. You don't need to worry about just your although that's fine with me as well. These are the photo credits of where we got these photos today. So I found most of them. Deposit Photos is a big contributor. Fight.com. There are some others that we used as well. And I mentioned this is something that you should all be doing when you can take photos and use them. And I'll pass it back to Becky to close things out. Thank you all very much. We appreciate your attention. want to close things out? There you are.
Well, Dan, I want to, first of all, thank you for a wonderful webinar. And Anneke and Pieter, thank you so much for your personalization of this information, too. That adds a very relevant aspect to the webinar and personalizes it. Eckhart, on the speaker resource page on the website, there's another reference for photos and images to help build out that list even further. So some good information there. And we thank everyone. We're looking forward to a terrific summit in Berlin, and we'll see you in just a couple of months.